Assalamu alaikum, shalom, peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to Universal God, Message of Peace. We've been away for a few months, but we're back again and with a big topic. Today, we're going to be talking about religious hatred. And I'm Lale Tuncer. This is Dr. Khalid Zaheer from Canada. And we have Rabbi Weissman from Washington. And today, part one of Religious Hatred, the Cause and the Cure. Rabbi Wiseman will be speaking this week. And next week, we'll hear Dr. Zaheer's perspective on this topic. So over to you, Rabbi Wiseman.
Okay. I volunteered for this job and I've regretted it many times over the past week. Um, and I've gone through many different iterations of like what I might possibly say. And none of them made me very happy. So I'm gonna just launch off with a personal observation. So my personal observation is that nobody who has ever known me well has hated me. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not sure that that means that I'm such a good person. It might. I mean, it's possible that I'm really good. But I think it means that we tend not to hate what we know, and we tend to hate what we don't know. And I think that in most cases, hatred is unfounded. Or it's unfounded, or it's kind of it's allowed to fester. Some relatively small um, complaint, and it may be even a reasonable complaint, um, can snowball into something else when it's left uncontrolled. It's interesting. We have an expression in Hebrew. It said that the temple was destroyed by sinat chinam, which means literally, um, uh, most people translate it as baseless hatred. But of course, there is no such thing as baseless hatred, right? Everybody has a reason to hate. If we ask somebody why they hate someone, they're going to give me reasons, right? They're going to say, because these people are evil, these people are greedy, these people are cruel, these people are this, these people are that, these people are they're going to have lots of reasons. So that sinat kinam cannot mean baseless hatred because there is no such thing. So the other way of understanding this expression sinat chinam is chinam also means for free, something which is let free. So it could mean that it's a hatred that instead of being dealt with, instead of dealing with it and saying, okay, I have an issue with this particular person or this particular group of people, or and addressing that issue and saying to the person, okay, I have this problem, or resolving the issue in whatever way that I can, right? Instead, I let the anger and the hatred fester, and it goes unchecked. And once it's unchecked, it now has free reign to do whatever it is that it wants. And so that happens a lot with ignorance. That when in a lack of information, when we don't know about something, we tend to fill it in with our imaginations. We tend to fill it in um, with misinformation, and so that misinformation now becomes the basis of hatred. And certainly you see that in the religious world, right? Where people really don't know a lot about each other. It is remarkable how even people who live in close proximity to each other really don't know anything. I'm a Jewish person in America, and I'm surrounded by primarily Christians and some Muslims, and I can tell you they know almost nothing about us. I mean, in terms of like what our religion is about and what we're about, and we know very little about them. If I were to go, I live next to a synagogue. If I were to walk across the street to the synagogue and I were to ask them, tell me something. That Christian church around the corner, what do they believe? They would have absolutely no idea. No, have absolutely no idea. And we used to have a mosque just a few feet away from my house also. And if I said, what do they believe? They would also have no idea. And if they don't have any idea, they'll make something up. That's the truth. And uh and in addition, unfortunately, I have to say this to be honest, when religious people speak about other people's religions, very often they simply get it wrong. Okay? They have no personal experience. They don't know anybody of that religion to call. I know that's a strange that's a strange point to make. I get calls all the time, okay, because of my particular position and because of my friend group, so to speak. Right? I get calls all the time from imams and from ministers asking me questions and saying, "So, what? Tell me about this thing. What do you guys really believe about this? How do we understand this?" And and I'm able to provide information, but most people don't have that network. And so when something appears in the news, they have absolutely no idea how to deal with it, right? They have no idea how to understand it. They can't put the facts together because they don't understand them, and they don't have anybody to ask. They have nobody to ask. And so uh, if they themselves may end up spreading misinformation. And I see that happening again and again. And so while sometimes that's by mistake, sometimes that's on purpose. Because the easiest way to get group cohesion is to have an enemy. I, s- the easiest way to get group cohesion is to have an enemy. The easiest way to get people together and to get um, people united is by having a common enemy. And I'll say I'm going to be very straightforward. I told Lale I was going to speak from the heart. I think that really since October 7th, since those events in Israel, I think that certainly in the Jewish community, um, the it consolidated a lot of negative feelings. And people found that those negative feelings brought everybody together. That and so there it became very difficult, right? Because if you were a rabbi, you were a Jewish leader, right? It was hard to avoid, right? Kind of stoking those flames because that was now giving a new life, right? They even have an expression, the October 8th Jew, right? The person who woke up, right? Who woke up to the Judaism on October 8th, but it's largely based on these negative feelings. And um so if you kind of have a hatred that's built on ignorance, then the simplest solution is knowledge, right? The simplest solution is for people to know each other. And hatred is also fueled by dehumanization. It's fueled by the inability to see the other, whoever the other is, as something less than human. And so we have to start seeing each other. Sometimes I think that we should all carry around our baby pictures, right? We should all carry around our baby pictures. And we should carry around pictures of our mothers and our grandmothers. And we should, at 24 hours a day, we should be showing each other family pictures. Because if you look at family pictures, you see that all families look alike, right? If I look at Lale's family, I'm going to find somebody who looks like my Uncle Herman. Okay, I'm gonna find somebody who reminds me of my Aunt Esther. I'm gonna find somebody, and I'm gonna see that Khalid's grandchild looks a little bit like my. I'm gonna see that as human beings, we have a common experience. Remember years ago, there was a book back in the 1960s called The Family of Man. It was actually uh, it was a photographic exhibition, I think, in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. And what it did is it took basic themes in human life, like like relationships, marriage, children, old age, and it showed people from all over the world engaged in these things. So children playing, children in Afghanistan, children in America, children in South Africa, and it showed couples, and it showed and what you saw is that there was a common human experience. And then we lose sight of that, and it's so easy to just think of other people as somehow less human than we are. So that's not possible once you know them. Okay? Once you know them, and once you can see them beyond their labels and um, beyond whatever membership cards they happen to be carrying in their wallet or what kind of hat they happen to be wearing on their head, um, then we see that there's a human being there, and that human being is just like us. Um, this is not an easy topic because I spend a lot of my time trying to wrestle with this in the world. Um, and it's very difficult. But the only way I can see is to get knowledge out there. Because as I said, I think that once we know people, it's very hard to hate them. As long as we don't know them, it's very easy to hate them. Um, and are there people who do horrible things? Yes, there are people who do horrible things. Um, and I'll t tell a story. There's a story that there was a rabbi, and he had a neighbor, and his neighbor was bad. His neighbor was just a mean guy. He didn't like his neighbor. For whatever reason, he didn't like his neighbor. And he was going to curse his neighbor. He had some magical way he was going to curse his neighbor. And he was all prepared. He had everything prepared to curse his neighbor. I'm not going to tell you how because I don't want anybody to do it. But he had this way. He was going to curse the neighbor. And his wife walks in and goes, "What are you doing?" It's always the wife, right? The wife walks in and says, like, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm cursing our neighbor." He says, why are you cursing your neighbor? Because he does this and does this. She says, no, no, no. He says, you can curse the sin, but don't curse the sinner, right? Curse what the person does wrong, right? Curse what the person does. You want to hate what the person does wrong? Go ahead. Hate what the person does wrong, but don't hate that person because that person, even the worst person, is better than the worst thing that they ever did. Well, we know this about people. You read the biographies of terrible people, right? It's always good. Everyone likes to read the biographies of good people. Try to read the biography of a terrible person. And what you will find is that as the terrible person was good to their mother. The terrible was kind to animals, right? The terrible person, right? And you think to yourself, how is this possible? Because there's a human being underneath there. And that human being is inherently redeemable. Okay? If the creator gave them enough energy to wake up in the morning, it means they're redeemable. If they're still in this world, it means they're redeemable. So for every minute that they were alive, they were redeemable. They could have changed. So trying to bring people to change, that's a great thing. Okay? And to have a hatred for the evil that people do, very good. But not a hatred for them because they are redeemable and they can be brought back to a proper humanity. And so I guess to sum everything up, the secret is in knowledge. The secret is in acknowledging the humanity and the value of every single human being. And as the Torah says, every human being is, and there's a hadith also that says this, every human being is created in God's image, not in God's image as if as a physical image, but we have in ourselves something which is godly and precious, and that is untouchable. And so there's that is always deserving of respect. And so we always have something to work with. And in ourselves, we have to, when it comes, hate sneaks up on you. Okay? It can sneak up on you. It's like the air that we breathe in some places and in some situations. It's the air we breathe. It's all around us, and we have to be very careful not to let ourselves get infected by it. It can come on you at a moment when you don't notice. So we have to really pay attention, and we have to really examine ourselves. We can have to make sure that our responses and our reactions, right, are based on real moral judgment and not based on some kind of irrational hatred. So I'll stop there. I think I just ranted, but that's my rant.
That was amazing. That was so beautiful and yeah, really well explained. And thank you for sharing your understanding of this topic, Rabbi Weissman. Dr. Zaheer, do you have any comments about?
Yes, I would first want to thank you, Dr. Lale, that after quite some time, we are back into communicating with each other to be able to get these pearls of wisdom from Rabbi Weissman. I mean, I now realize what exactly were we missing. Uh, I will just mention briefly uh, an incident that happened recently in my small city of Guelph. We lost a Muslim spiritual religious leader who was elderly in his 90s. And in his funeral prayer was an elderly man with a flowing white beard, with a cap that clearly suggested that he was a Jewish rabbi. He was actually introduced to me by somebody with that introduction. So, as I'm always keen, I later went to meet him, and he said that yes, I am a Jew. I'm a rabbi here. We have a synagogue. Uh, and he fondly mentioned the late Mr. Iftikhar. He was calling him fondly Ifti. And he said that long time ago, in 1961, when Ifti was here and he started his stay in Guelph, I told Ifti that, look here, the relationship between your community and my community in the outside world is not great. But let's not replicate it in Guelph. Let's make a beginning. And there is so much in common between the two traditions that it's so surprising that people belonging to our respective groups, religious groups, are at odds with each other. And I say that I couldn't have agreed more. To be honest, each time when I read the Quran, it's the same thing that occurs. Incidentally, I did mention before that in my school and in my masjid, we have regular uh, visits of Christian school students. And, they, when I talk to them, talk about various subjects. And uh, the last visit, only a few days ago, I was telling them that, somebody asked me about halal meat. And while talking about it, I said that, once we learn about the fact that an animal has gone through the process in a Jewish community and it has been declared kosher, we feel so confident that it's absolutely fit for us to eat without any hesitation. So thank you very much, Rabbi Wiseman. I just would want to say two things which would just reiterate what you've said in my words. Uh, One thing you mentioned, and honestly, it confirms what I have always been saying and believing. And what actually made me so strongly inclined to have this forum as a means of discussion. I believe that the problems of this world are because of one reason, and that is poor communication. If we start communicating with each other properly, I am absolutely certain
Mm.
that there'll still be differences, but the differences would never be serious. We don't have we don't have the guts to communicate with each other properly. I don't know. I mean, there are
Mm.
barriers, and I think Satan most effectively uh, exploits this human weakness, which you very ably mentioned. Some of the aspects of it. So that's one thing, and the other thing is a very interesting and reasonable statement that I heard from a Christian pastor recently, with whom I sometimes used to have discussion. And honestly, this question, which is pure commonsensical question, I mean, why I often wonder, why do people in general and religious people in particular not ask this question to themselves? And the question is the following: what if I was born a Jew? What if I was born a Christian? I mean, are you telling me I would have been a Muslim? Very unlikely. Very unlikely. And likewise for the Jews, for the Christians, and for that matter for the Hindus, etc. So, for God's sake, let's be more reasonable and let's come together. And as you rightly pointed out, first and foremost, we are human beings. Let's acknowledge it, let's celebrate it, and let's lessen the hatred and therefore the woes of the world. Thank you very much, Rabbi. I mean, it was really very good to hear you once again.
That's a very that's a very powerful point. I mean, um, y- yes, there is no there. So I hope people hear this. Hey, there is no point in reproducing the the conflicts in the Middle East outside of the Middle East. There's no benefit in that, right? It's bad enough that it's bad enough that it's there. There's no reason to bring it anywhere else. There's no reason to bring it to the UK, to the United States, to Canada, and try to reproduce what's not good in the beginning. Okay, it's not livable for the people who are living it. So why would you want to create a world, your own world, in a way that's unlivable? It makes no sense. It makes no sense to do that. We're living in very different kinds of societies. I just want to say, in America, Canada, UK, we're living in very different kinds of societies, and societies which are built on the idea of people living next to each other. That's what they're built on. And so if that's the case, we should be taking advantage of that, right? And enjoying that. We should be enjoying the benefits of that. And the benefits of that is that we're able to know each other because we are next to each other. We don't have a wall between us. Okay? And we don't have soldiers between us. So that means we shouldn't build up walls and we shouldn't put soldiers between us. Right? We should be able to have access to each other and to communicate with each other. I think we're making a pretty good model here. I think we're doing a good job, but it shows that it's absolutely possible, right? It's absolutely possible to do. It's not. It's all we had to do was log on to Zoom. Okay, wasn't that difficult? It's really easy, and and the obstacles are obstacles of the heart. The obstacles are mental obstacles. It's like, should I really do this? What are people going to think of me? What if it, right? There are those things. But if we're brave, a little bit brave, a lot brave, then we'll be able to cross the bridge into somebody else's world, and we'll find out that world is really not so different from ours. We'll find out that they're also living the human experience, and we get friends.
That's
We get people still have to get to Canada, but we'll get to we have friends, and that itself is. I mean, what are we here in this world for? I mean, we're here in the world for each other, and we have the opportunity to the opportunity to know each other. as the Quran says, right? We were made in all sorts of different ways, right, to know each other. Okay,
That's
but
right.
okay, that's something to do. That's not just like an accident. It's not going to happen by accident. Okay, you have to go out there and you have to get to know each other, and you'll see
Yeah.
that you're dealing with human beings just like you, and the hate will just go away.
Yeah, I before I ask Dr. Lale to give us her final remarks, which are always very, very deep. I told this rabbi very fondly and proudly about the discussions that we have been having, and he indeed was impressed. And I hope that one day I bring him also
Yeah, please.
for a discussion. Yeah, yeah, hopefully. Dr. Lale, it's over to you, and we'd like to know your views.
No, I really don't know what I mean. You both just spoke so beautifully, and I'm so, so grateful. And I have to hold back my tears because I might cry. But I've obviously I can. The reason why we, set up this charity in the first place is because um, it was because of this. Really, um, it really saddens me that there's so much, religious hatred in the world, and um, my understanding was that it's because of either ignorance or arrogance. And so the arrogance, because, everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to be able to say that their truth is the truth and that there is no higher truth. And ignorance and also arrogance, because, we can sometimes, people of, spiritual, it's easy to have this spiritual ego. And sometimes, unfortunately, religious leaders can become arrogant sometimes and use that power to sort of do bad things. And even though I would encourage everybody to not idolize religious leaders, we should always seek truth ourselves. We do need role models. And unfortunately, people, when you sort of idolize a religious leader, and then you see that they do something wrong or bad either in the name of religion, or they give an impression that they're religious, but then they do something that seems really wrong and immoral, then you can develop like a hatred towards that religion because that person represents that religion in a way. And I would ask people who I can completely understand. So there's a lot of religious hypocrisy, either because of ignorance or arrogance, and that can cause people to hate a certain religion. And then the danger that comes with that is that there's all these beautiful, good people who just want to practice their religion in peace and be a good person. And then they get hate crimes against them because of this religious hatred. Um, and then it's like retaliation and revenge, and people put their barriers up and they don't want to get to know each other because they're scared. As you said, I think there's a big, a fear that's there, and they're afraid. But it's all very tragic, really, because then you've also got this other group of people who look at all of these organized religions, if you like, and then become atheists because they associate religion with God, as in spirituality, and then they stop believing altogether. And I have a special interest in mental health, and I really believe that faith is a big part of, belief in God, belief in a creator, belief in God is so, so important for our well-being and our healing, and having that personal relationship and feeling like you have a purpose in life. And there's so much depression and anxiety because people are feeling like they're losing their purpose and they don't have a purpose, because what's the purpose? you know what? And then And as you've mentioned some really powerful points, there's a common ground that we can all, there's a place where we can all meet. And the purpose of this charity was to try and create that space where we can all sort of meet and our common ground, and a place where, one, that there's no arguments, because there's certain parts of all of us that we can't argue about. As a human being, we all share our common ground, where we all desire the same thing, really, you know, and the ways of peace, we can all relate to them, and the beautiful attributes of our Creator, because we were all made in that image. So, for example, gratitude, forgiveness, kindness, seeking truth, and belief in truth. Actually, I think, who would deny that truth exists? You know, is it equal to falsehood? Is it otherwise? So when we question these things, and if we do it together, that's such a nice thing to do. So seeking truth together, but that means getting rid of our ego and getting rid of believing that we are right and somebody else is wrong. Um, we need to actually try and understand the other perspective. And I see all these religions as different lights, different colors of the same light, or different paths up the same mountain. Um, we want to get to the top. We might have one way of going up, but the person on the other side has their own way of going up. And there's many, many paths. And every person's journey is different. But I have to say that from my personal experience, I have been tested, I have been challenged. I'm always challenged with these things, and I completely understand how difficult this is um, to be able to get to a point where you want to, let's say, you see all this injustice that's happening around you, and or to you or to other people that you love. And like your story, Rabbi Wiseman, with the neighbor and wanting to curse the neighbor, we sometimes have those emotions, like you want justice, you want to be able to do that. And I think we all have a power to be able to do that. But what's really beautiful is when we can actually make a choice to just say, no, I'm going to put down that weapon. I'm not going to, truth is a powerful weapon and it really destroys, but why? Isn't love a more powerful weapon? If you really want to just, transform an enemy, isn't it better to just say, actually, I'm going to love you? you know, I'm going to love you. And even though you've hurt me, I'm going to choose to love you back.
How we deal with that. I like that you said that there's a certain arrogance also plays, and ego plays a big part in it also, right? Um, it is Rabbi. I think Rabbi. I just gave you a title. Rabbi Zaheer. I just gave Khalid the title. Uh,
Bye-bye.
what what Dr. Zaheer said really t touched me. Like, so I'm right. I believe I'm right because I happen to be born in America to Jewish parents. Had I been born in Pakistan, I would I would be thinking that the Dr. Zaheer was right. I mean, eh, it's a when we sort of when we think about that, we think about like how circumstantial that really is. It's humbling, honestly. You
Exactly.
know,
It's got their own reasons for what they believe and what they think, and it's so important to understand their perspective. And the only way we can do that is to actually sit and, like, talk to each other, really, because that's how can we really understand the other? And the other person is the other side of us, really. Like, it gives you a better perspective of the truth to see the other side. So otherwise you just have a two-dimensional version of something.
well, yeah, some people, I think that what do they call it in on the internet, the echo chamber, right? A lot of people live in echo chambers, right? And we kind of build our world around us, and now the algorithms help us to do this, right? To have this kind of world in which everybody agrees with us, and everybody thinks exactly like us, everybody looks exactly like us. And if you do that, I mean, you'll grow, but you'll be stunted in a way. Right? I mean, there's a kind of stunting to that. And then that could be desirable for some people. They kind of want to be stunted. That's okay. But there's a kind of growth that can come, right, from opening yourself up to other people with other ideas that I think is much more fertile and much more and gives us much more strength and life and expands us rather than shrinks us down into some little tiny box.
Exactly. And people are afraid of that painful experience because it can be painful to, it's easier just to stay in your comfort zone, not go out into the world.
Right.
All you see is your home, it's where you feel comfortable. But it's scary to go out because there's risks and, you know, um, but you learn so much. You learn so much, and that's a risk I think, we should try and challenge ourselves to understand. And sometimes in the most painful experiences, that's where we learn the most, actually. So if we try and see wisdom in everything, every experience, and just accept that it's all from God, it's there to teach us something. Every experience, every hard emotion, every mistake we make, there's wisdom in there. So, and that wisdom is just, that's what is, if we seek that together, that's such a beautiful thing to do, I think, together.
Amen.
And so, yeah, God bless you both. And thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
It was
much.
a pleasure to see you again. And
Thank you. Same here.
inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, we'll be back next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody.
Remember,
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Peace and blessings. Bye.
Thank you.